Okay, here we go with 1993. 15 films collectively lost somewhere between $175 and $200 million. I've got Arnold Schwarzenegger's most humiliating failure here. I've got Madonna in a thriller so bad that industry professionals laughed through the screening. And I've got a movie written by the future creator of Breaking Bad that made less than $85,000 total. One of these disasters lost so much money it nearly sank an entire studio. Which one? Let's jump straight in. Here's a movie you've definitely never heard of. Wilder Napalm was written by a young screenwriter fresh out of college named Vince Gilligan. Yeah, that Vince Gilligan. The guy who would later create Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul wrote his first produced screenplay about two estranged brothers who can start fires with their minds. Both brothers are in love with the same woman who happens to be under house arrest for arson. I'm not making this up. TriStar Pictures actually made this thing. They had Deborah Winger, who turned down a role in This Boy's Life to be here. They had Dennis Quaid. They had a director coming off the hit TV series Moonlighting, and then they got cold feet. The studio shelved Wilder Napalm for an entire year before dumping it into limited release in August 1993. Opening weekend, $12,000. Total gross, exactly $84,859. That's not a typo. $84,859. For context, a single minute of Breaking Bad cost more to produce than this entire film earned theatrically. Here's the thing though, Gilligan wouldn't get another feature screenplay produced for 5 years. Hollywood basically wrote him off. He found his calling in television instead, and the rest is history. But somewhere out there, Wilder Napalm exists on VHS, waiting to be discovered by Breaking Bad completists. Columbia and Castle Rock looked at an $18 million budget and said, yeah, let's make a movie about a kid who convinces his 7-year-old brother that he's a government-engineered robot soldier. Josh and Sam came out in November 1993, and almost nobody showed up. The premise sounds like a dark comedy, but the execution was something else entirely. Two brothers dealing with their parents' divorce run away from home after the older one tells his little brother he's a strategically altered mutant created by the military. Critics were baffled. The Washington Post called it a low-energy primer for raising a serial killer. That's an actual quote from a real review. It made $1.64 million. That's 9.1% of its budget. Not even a dime for every dollar spent. The Planet Hollywood premiere tells you everything you need to know. Only the two child stars and their families showed up. No other cast members. No crew. Just two kids and their parents in an empty restaurant. The film has never been released on DVD or Blu-ray. It's trapped in VHS limbo, and honestly, it's probably staying there. Oh, and there's a young Jake Gyllenhaal in a small role that nobody ever mentions in his retrospectives. Wonder why? Disney and Amblin Entertainment teamed up to make A Far Off Place, a survival adventure starring a young Reese Witherspoon. You'd think that pedigree would guarantee something watchable. You'd be wrong. The film opens with poachers massacring elephants with chainsaws and then depicts the main character's parents being attacked. This is a Disney movie for families, released under the Walt Disney Pictures banner, not Touchstone. Someone in marketing made a serious miscalculation. It gets worse. The original director and cinematographer were fired just 2 or 3 weeks into shooting after executives saw severely out-of-focus dailies. Steven Spielberg himself had to recommend a replacement director to salvage the production. The final product earned $12.89 million domestically and confused everyone who saw the trailers expecting a family adventure. Roger Ebert criticized the tonal issues. Variety called it a better African travelogue than a movie. The film accompanied the final Roger Rabbit animated short ever made, which is honestly the more interesting piece of trivia. A Far Off Place has never appeared on Disney+, and I'm guessing it never will. Too dark for the brand, too forgotten to bother with. 1993 was supposed to be Val Kilmer's year. He had Tombstone, he had True Romance, he was everywhere. And then there's The Real McCoy, a heist thriller so anonymous that even Kilmer completists forget it exists. Kim Basinger plays an expert bank robber trying to go straight. Kilmer plays her reluctant partner. Universal Pictures didn't disclose the budget, but they clearly spent money on it. The problem? Zero chemistry between the leads. Critics noticed, audiences noticed. The box office noticed. It made $6.5 million domestically. That's it. Universal didn't even bother with an international release. They just cut their losses and moved on. The marketing was borderline deceptive, showing Basinger in outfits that never actually appeared in the final film. Roger Ebert wrote that the movie recycles the same devices, not quite as well as the originals. It holds a 22% on Rotten Tomatoes. Kilmer recovered. Basinger recovered. The real McCoy did not. It's the definition of a forgettable studio product that deserved to be forgotten. The original title was Cloak and Diapers. Someone at MGM realized that was somehow worse and changed it to Undercover Blues. The movie still flopped, but at least they avoided that embarrassment. Kathleen Turner and Dennis Quaid star as married secret agents trying to balance parenthood with fighting crime in New Orleans. The pitch was basically The Thin Man but with a baby. MGM spent somewhere between $20 and $25 million trying to make that work. It didn't. The film made $12.3 million worldwide. Critics found it tonally confused, too silly to be thrilling, too sluggish to be funny. Turner was one of the biggest stars of the 1980s, but this marked the effective end of her run as a consistent box office lead. She was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis shortly after filming and transitioned primarily to supporting roles. The one bright spot? Stanley Tucci's breakout performance as a bungling criminal named Morte. Critics said his energy alone justified the film's existence. He went on to have a fantastic career. Turner and Quaid moved on to other things. Undercover Blues became a footnote. Hulk Hogan in a tutu. That was the entire marketing campaign for Mr. Nanny. New Line Cinema spent $10 million on a Home Alone ripoff starring a professional wrestler, and the best they could come up with was, look at the big man in a ballerina outfit. The working title was Rough Stuff, which tells you everything about the creative process here. Hogan plays a former wrestler who becomes a bodyguard for two bratty children. Slapstick ensues. Critics were not amused. Audiences were not interested. It made $4.3 million domestically. That's a $5.7 million loss before you even factor in marketing. The film consistently ranks on worst movies ever made lists, and honestly, it deserves the spot. There's a reason Hogan's acting career never really took off, and Mr. Nanny is Exhibit A. The one weird footnote: child star Madeline Zima later went on to star in the TV series The Nanny. She was clearly talented. She was just cursed to be associated with nanny-themed content for the early part of her career. Robert Downey Jr. deserved better than Heart and Souls. The film is actually pretty good. It has a 58% on Rotten Tomatoes, which isn't great, but isn't terrible either. RDJ got a Saturn Award nomination for his performance. The cast included Keira Sedgwick, Charles Grodin, Alfre Woodard, and Elizabeth Shue. Universal spent $25 million on a fantasy comedy with genuine heart. It made $16.6 million and opened at number 6. The problem wasn't the movie. The problem was the summer of 1993. Jurassic Park was devouring everything in its path. Heart and Souls opened in August, after dinosaurs had already dominated the cultural conversation for 2 months. Critics found it overly sentimental, but audiences who actually saw it generally liked it. There just weren't enough of them. This is one of those hidden gems that became a victim of timing. If it had come out in February or October, we might be talking about it differently. Instead, it got crushed by the biggest movie of the year and quietly disappeared. RDJ recovered spectacularly. Heart and Souls became a cult favorite on home video. But theatrically, it was an $8.4 million loss. Some classics should stay untouched. The original Born Yesterday from 1950 won Judy Holliday the Oscar for Best Actress. It's a beloved comedy with razor-sharp dialogue by Garson Kanin. So naturally, Hollywood decided to remake it in 1993 with Melanie Griffith, John Goodman, and Don Johnson. Roger Ebert gave it 1 out of 4 stars. He called it gloomy and noted zero chemistry between the leads. Critics pointed out that the witty original dialogue had been systematically dumbed down. Griffith received a Razzie nomination for Worst Actress. Here's an interesting detail. Griffith and Johnson were married at the time of filming. It was their second marriage to each other. The lack of on-screen chemistry despite their real-life relationship tells you something about the production. The film made $17.95 million domestically. Not a complete disaster, but definitely a disappointment for Disney's Hollywood Pictures label. Goldie Hawn reportedly turned down the lead role specifically to avoid competing with Holliday's iconic original. She made the right call. The Look Who's Talking franchise replaced talking babies with talking dogs. That decision resulted in the only film in this list with a 0% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Not one positive review out of 25. 0%. TriStar spent $22 million on this sequel. They got Danny DeVito and Diane Keaton to voice the dogs. The original voice actors, including Bruce Willis, didn't return. Gene Siskel gave it 0 stars and called it an abysmal, embarrassing sequel. Roger Ebert said it looks like it was chucked up by an automatic screenwriting machine. It made $10.3 million. That's a $12 million loss on a movie that nobody wanted. Here's the irony, though. John Travolta's career was at absolute rock bottom. This was his lowest point, and Danny DeVito, who voiced one of the dogs, would help produce Pulp Fiction the very next year through Jersey Films. That film revived Travolta's career and made him an A-lister again. So while Look Who's Talking Now represents career nadir for Travolta, redemption was literally 12 months away. Walter Hill made a genuinely great Western with Geronimo, an American legend. He had Gene Hackman, he had Robert Duvall, he had Wes Studi in the title role. He had a young Matt Damon who left Harvard just 12 credits shy of graduation to appear in this film. Columbia spent $35 million. The sound design was so good it got an Oscar nomination. It made $18.64 million. That's roughly half its budget back. What happened? TNT aired a made-for-TV Geronimo movie right before the theatrical release. Hill blamed this directly. I don't think there are a hell of a lot of movies where you can take basically the same story, show it to 50 million people, and bring yours out a week later. He wasn't wrong. There's some great behind-the-scenes drama here. Robert Duvall's character was supposed to survive, but Hill killed him off to shorten the runtime. Duvall later said, "If I'd known I was going to end early, I might not have done the movie." Quentin Tarantino loved the film and said America wasn't worthy of the privilege. Sometimes good movies just don't find their audience. Stephen King's 700-page novel about the devil opening an antique shop in Castle Rock, Maine, got crammed into a 2-hour movie. Needful Things had Max von Sydow playing Satan. It had Ed Harris as the sheriff. It had a $15 million budget and a director making his feature debut, Fraser C. Heston, son of Charlton Heston. The film made $15.19 million domestically, technically close to break-even theatrically, but factoring in marketing, it was still a loss. Critics felt the story simply couldn't fit the runtime. Variety called it a sadistic, mean-spirited, overlong exercise. Here's a weird production detail. Filming in British Columbia required 500 live turkeys for scenes around a farmhouse. That's the kind of logistical nightmare that probably wasn't worth the final product. Amanda Plummer won a Saturn Award for Best Supporting Actress despite the film's reception, which is something. Another King adaptation that couldn't capture the book's scope. It happens more often than not with his work. Bruce Willis made a thriller so bad that he publicly apologized for it. Striking Distance cost $30 million and was originally written for Ed Harris, then rewritten for Robert De Niro, before Willis took over. Neither of those actors would have saved it. The film follows a demoted Pittsburgh cop tracking a serial offender on the city's rivers. Test audiences called the original cut Hudson Hawk without the laughs. That's brutal considering Hudson Hawk was already a notorious flop. Columbia pushed the release from May to September, hoping to fix it in editing. It made $24 million domestically and $77 million worldwide. That's close to break even, but the reputation was destroyed. Crew members nicknamed Willis Orson Willis for his constant rewrites and controlling behavior on set. The original title, Three Rivers, was changed due to confusion with the Pittsburgh Steelers Stadium. Willis later publicly apologized for the quality of the film. When the star apologizes, you know something went seriously wrong. At least he owned it. RoboCop 3 was filmed in 1991 and sat on a shelf for 2 years while Orion Pictures went bankrupt. By the time it finally released in November 1993, nobody cared anymore. The original RoboCop star, Peter Weller, was replaced with Robert John Burke. Here's the thing. Burke had to wear Weller's suit, which didn't fit him properly. He was in constant physical pain throughout the entire shoot. The studio also switched from an R rating to PG-13 to court younger audiences, which alienated the franchise's core fan base. It cost $22 million and made $10.6 million domestically. Worldwide, it hit $47 million, but that still wasn't enough. Nancy Allen specifically requested her character be ended just to escape the franchise. The film features RoboCop with a jetpack, which was widely mocked. The video game tie-in released before the movie due to production delays, spoiling the entire plot. Director Fred Decker's career was effectively ended. He didn't direct another film for 25 years. The RoboCop franchise wouldn't recover until the 2014 reboot, and even that was divisive. Some franchises just need to stay finished. Madonna made a provocative thriller called Body of Evidence and then sabotaged it herself by releasing her explicit SX book 2 months before the film came out. The whole selling point of the movie was, what does Madonna look like in intimate scenes? Her book answered that question for everyone who wanted to know. The film cost $30 million. Madonna plays a woman accused of causing her elderly lover's fatal heart attack through physical exertion. Willem Dafoe plays her attorney who gets involved with her. It was originally rated NC-17 and trimmed to R. It holds an 8% on Rotten Tomatoes. It made $13 million domestically and $38 million worldwide. That's a significant loss. Here's how bad it was. Madonna's acting coach reportedly quit before production, claiming she thinks she knows everything. At an industry preview screening, professionals allegedly howled with laughter throughout. Julianne Moore later called her scene in the film just awful and a big mistake. Madonna won the Razzie for Worst Actress. The candle scene became infamous for all the wrong reasons. Body of Evidence was supposed to be erotic and dangerous. It was just embarrassing. Arnold Schwarzenegger was the biggest action star on the planet in 1993. Columbia Pictures gave him $85 million to make Last Action Hero, a meta-comedy about a kid who gets transported into his favorite action movie. They spent another $25 million on marketing. The break-even point was somewhere around $220 to $275 million. It made $137 million worldwide. Columbia declared a $26 million loss, but according to AFI Catalog and The New Yorker, the unrecouped balance was actually $124 million or more. This was the biggest disaster of the year by a massive margin. What went wrong? Everything. Columbia locked in a June 18th release date before Universal scheduled Jurassic Park. Then Universal moved Jurassic to June 11th, 1 week earlier. Schwarzenegger begged Columbia to delay by 4 weeks. They refused. Director John McTiernan later said, "To open the week after Jurassic Park, God. To get to the depth of bad judgment involved in that, you'd need a snorkel." At a May test screening, audiences initially cheered when they learned what they were about to see. By the end, according to reports, the movie lay there like a big fried egg. Columbia allegedly destroyed the review cards. 8 writers worked on the script, including Shane Black and William Goldman, who got $1 million for an uncredited rewrite. The marketing was absurd. Columbia paid $500,000 to advertise on a NASA rocket, the first film ever to do so. The launch was delayed until after the film had already flopped. They put a 40-foot inflatable Schwarzenegger in Times Square. They had a $20 million Burger King tie-in calling it the biggest movie of the summer. It wasn't. Jurassic Park was the biggest movie of the summer and the year, and eventually the biggest movie ever at that point. Schwarzenegger was devastated. He told interviewers years later, "I cannot tell you how upset I was. It hurts your feelings. It's embarrassing. I didn't want to see anyone for a week." He recovered with True Lies the following year, but Last Action Hero remained a sore subject for decades. 1993 proved that no star was safe when something bigger came along. Schwarzenegger, Willis, Madonna, Hogan, it didn't matter who you were. Jurassic Park changed the game, and everyone else was just collateral damage. Sony took a $2.7 billion write-off in November 1994. That's one of the largest in Japanese corporate history, and failures like Last Action Hero were a big part of it. The studio had overpaid for Columbia in 1989 and spent years bleeding money on projects that couldn't compete. Some of these films found second lives. Hocus Pocus became a cult classic through television airings. Super Mario Bros. Developed an ironic fan base, but most of them just disappeared. That's what happens when you release a movie in the wrong summer against the wrong competition with the wrong expectations. The lesson? Timing is everything. And sometimes, no amount of star power can save you from a dinosaur.